Hey students, this video is an explanation of your essay 1, which will be due next Sunday, September, I believe it's the 26th. I'll have to double check. Let's see, let me scroll down. Yes, September 26th. So this essay will be due on Sunday, September 26th, but before the final draft is due, you have a free write due, you have a discovery draft, which is also called a rough draft due. You have a what it says, what it does worksheet due. So there are a lot of preliminary assignments that count as quiz grades that need to be turned in before the final draft. So keep those dates in mind. I'll go over them at the end of this video. All right, the first essay for this class is a poetry explication. And a poetry explication is just a sort of play-by-play explanation of how a poem works. So a poetry explication is one explanation of how the elements in the poem work together to achieve a total meaning and or effect. For your first paper assignment, you will explicate one of the poems we have read for this unit. So any poem we've read so far, except My Papa's Waltz, since we will study a sample explication of that poem as a means of reflecting on what makes a good explication. So a good way to think about a poetry explication, I think I used the phrase play-by-play. That's because if you think of a poem or any of the poems you're going to explicate as sort of a touchdown, as a success, what you need to do is you need to, in your poetry explication, describe in the order in which the poem unfolds how the poet created this effect that they successfully created. The same way you might give a play-by-play of a touchdown in American football. So for example, if somebody came into the room right after a football team scored a touchdown and they say, how did that happen? You might say, well, they did this one play where they did a pass and they gained 10 yards there. And then they did this other play where, I don't know, the guy ran and they gained 30 yards there. You would give them the breakdown of how it happened. That's essentially what you're doing in a poetry explication. If, for example, you think that My Papa's Waltz creates this effect of a painful yet loving relationship between a son and his father, you're going to break down for the reader, though you won't be writing about My Papa's Waltz. This is just an example. You would break down for the reader, going through the poem, from the beginning, middle to the end, how the poet created that effect. All right, so here are the steps you should take to begin your poetry explication. Explore the questions on the questions to consider when reading a poem handout, which are pertinent to the poem you choose. Reread the poem several times and pick the elements from the poem about which you will write. For example, if you were writing about My Papa's Waltz, you might want to discuss the mixture of images of violence and attachment, the use of rhyme and meter, and the speaker's identity and tone. Then you will want to tie all these elements together line by line to discuss the overall effect of the poem. If you're not sure how to begin working on your explication, look over the sample explication of My Papa's Waltz. That's on the same page in this week's Canvas module as this video is. So just look a little bit further down. That'll give you a general idea of what an explication is. After you've considered many different elements, hold on just a sec, there we go, sorry. After you've considered many different elements of the poem you're writing about, write an introductory paragraph in which you identify the poem's title and author and say 2 or 3 general things about the poem. The introductory paragraph is a good place to describe some of the formal elements of the poem. For example, is the poem in stanzas? Does it rhyme? Is it free verse? The last sentence of your introductory paragraph should be a clear thesis statement. Your thesis statement should state what you believe the overall effect of the poem is. In order to figure out how to organize the body of your explication essay, think about a way to divide up the poem into sections. Then divide up the body of your essay into sections which describe one section of the poem at a time, going in chronological order. That is, describing the section that comes first, and the section that comes last. As you attempt to prove your thesis statement, make sure you use specific examples from the poem to back up your claim. I want to back up just for a second. You are going to divide up the poem into sections which might not necessarily follow the stanzas of the poem. For example, if you're doing oranges, there's one really long stanza and then a very short stanza. So it wouldn't make sense to write, one paragraph about that long stanza and then another paragraph about the short stanza. It might make more sense. Often a good way to break up oranges is to describe the lines before the drugstore, then write a paragraph about what happens in the drugstore, and then write a paragraph about how the mood has changed after the drugstore. So a before, beginning, middle, and end structure. In Midterm Break, it has a lot of little stanzas. So you might divide it up, you might first discuss the first 4 stanzas, then the middle 4, I can't remember how many there are exactly, and then the last 4. However you want to do it, it doesn't need to be even. You just need to make a decision. In Those Winter Sundays, I think it's 3 stanzas total. So it might work beautifully for Those Winter Sundays to write a paragraph about each stanza. But you won't be able to do that for all the poems we discuss. So I said, as you attempt to prove your thesis statement, make sure you use specific examples from the poems to back up your claim. From the poem. When you quote, instead of citing page numbers, you will cite line numbers. For example, if you're quoting Theodore Roethke's lines, "We romped until the pan slid from the kitchen shelf, my mother's countenance could not unfrown itself," you would follow that quotation with a parenthetical citation. And you can see on the assignment page, it looks like 11 or 2 ones, but it's really LL for 2 lines. So if it was 1 line, it would just be 1L period 5. But because it's more than 1 line, in the parentheses, I put LL period 5 to 8. And then the period for the end of the sentence goes after the parentheses. Note that the forward slash in the quotation marks the line separation, the line break. So you always, when you're quoting from poetry, you always put a slash after, at the place in the poem where there's a line break. Make sure to avoid bald quotations or dropped quotations. Always lead into a quotation so the reader knows how it connects to your main point. Next week, you will have an opportunity to watch a video about quotation sandwiches. It's extremely important you watch that video so you know what a dropped quotation and a bald quotation is, and you can avoid them. You should include at least 3 quotations, but no more than 10. You do not need a works cited page. Remember that the purpose of an explication is not to argue whether a poem is good or bad. Rather, it is to attempt to discover what the poet is doing and how he or she does it. A good explication does not only identify the whats of a poem, identifying speaker, diction, tone, interesting language, it also explains the hows. For example, a good explication not only states the identity of the narrator, it explains how the poet reveals that identity. How do we know it's the son speaking in My Papa's Waltz? At what point do we learn that? Also, a good explication does not just state if a poem is rhymed or unrhymed, but describes what effect that rhyme or lack of it has on the reader. For example, My Papa's Waltz is a rhyming poem, which makes it seem very simple and orderly. But the scene it describes is pretty chaotic, as a lot of you noticed. So the contrast between the sort of orderly, predictable structure of the poem and the chaotic nature of the scene it describes maybe heightens that sense of chaos and the confusion the speaker might feel. One more tip. Often when writing an explication, you will come to a particular line or stanza that stumps you. That is, you feel like you have nothing to say about it. When that happens, imagine the poem without that line or stanza. How would the poem be different if that line or stanza were missing? So for example, in My Papa's Waltz, we get the detail that the father's knuckle was battered. And usually people who have battered knuckles maybe have been in a fight or they punched somebody, right? So how would the poem be different if that were missing? Maybe there'd be a little, the father would seem a little less violent. So if you're stumped on a line, experiment with thinking about the poem without that line. The suggested length of this essay is 2 to 3 pages, and it's worth 10% of your final grade. A filled out what it says, what it does worksheet, which will help you to start to think about the elements of a poem in more detail, is due on Sunday, September 19th. And there's a separate video that explains how to fill out that worksheet. And a free write on the poem you're writing about is due at the same time. And there's a separate video and set of instructions for that. A typed discovery draft or rough draft is due on Wednesday, September 22nd. The final draft is due on Sunday, September 26th. Should you seek help at the Learning Center, which I always encourage students to do, remember to bring a copy of this assignment to show the tutor. And then here at the end of your assignment is the rubric I will use to grade your assignment, which I encourage you to use as a checklist. Often when students do really poorly on an essay, they're losing points on things that were right on the grading rubric. So this is your checklist. If you do all these things, it's going to be pretty hard to do very poorly on this essay. So make sure you go through the whole rubric and that you're doing all the things that the rubric is going to, all the things that you're going to be evaluated on the rubric. All right, I obviously am happy to look at rough drafts. I'm happy to answer questions. Come see me, email me. Let me know what you need to succeed on this assignment. Take care.